This is CNN Breaking News.
We have major breaking news into CNN. Three sources tell CNN that according to an early U.S. intelligence assessment, the U.S. military strikes on three of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back a few months.
That's right. So this is an assessment that actually is out from the Defense Intelligence Agency. That is the Pentagon's intelligence arm. And it was based on a battle damage assessment conducted by U.S. CENTCOM after the strikes, according to one of the sources. Let's go to CNN national security correspondent Natasha Bertrand, who has this exclusive new reporting. This is to that question that has been asked about how much damage has been done. This is a real question. It's also a political question that has been to something that Donald Trump has been sort of dealing with here recently. What are you learning, Natasha?
Pete the Leaks is back at it again, and that shouldn't come as a surprise to any of us. And what else shouldn't come as a surprise is what is leaking out of the Pentagon. And that is a breaking news story that shows just how much Donald Trump has lied to us all about his strike on Iran. What we knew to be an operational failure, what Donald Trump lauded as a complete success. But the leak coming out of the Pentagon just confirms that he was lying the entire time. And he is completely panicked, and so is Hegseth, because more leaks are coming out under his watch. We're going to get into it all. And of course, the implications. But first, we have to start where this story began this morning, as Donald Trump attacked CNN, who has now obtained this leak. But first, let's start with the context of Trump.
And the pilots should be given credit. They're not after the pilots, they're after me. They want to try and demean.
Do you believe that Iran can rebuild its nuclear program?
No, Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there? Absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. The B-2 pilots did their job. They did it better than anybody could even imagine. They hit late in the evening. It was dark with no moon, and they hit that target with every one of those things, and that place is gone. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. You take a look at the pinpricks, and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks and these cable networks are real losers. You really are. You're real losers.
Israel says that they violated the peace.
You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch that garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news. But I think CNN is a gutless group of people. And the people that run it, nobody even knows it's been sold so many times. But the people that run it ought to be ashamed. MSDNC, a guy named Brian Roberts, he heads it. He's a disgrace. He's a weak, pathetic disgrace.
So Trump has been saying this for days now, as we are getting preliminary reports on what the actual damage done to the sites that were struck in Iran actually was. Donald Trump, of course, immediately claimed victory, saying that these nuclear sites were completely obliterated, that there was no way that Iran was ever going to be close to building a nuclear weapon because of the damage done from these strikes. And the actual reporting, not just Donald Trump thumping his chest, was sure there was damage done, and it was significant, but nowhere near a complete obliteration. That is the reporting that was also coming out of the Pentagon to some extent. They weren't chest thumping like Donald Trump was sure Hegseth was, but not the actual military officials. But now we have some breaking news from CNN confirming that Donald Trump had been lying the whole time. And it comes in the form of a leak out of the Pentagon. Let's take a look. And then we're going to talk about the implications for this all.
Yeah, look, Brianna, this is the first assessment that we are getting that the U.S. intelligence community has found about the battle damage that resulted from those U.S. military strikes on these three Iranian nuclear facilities over the weekend. And as you said, it was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the Pentagon's intelligence arm. And it is worth noting that it is a very early assessment. The strikes were only a matter of days ago, and the intelligence community is still gathering intelligence. They are still working to come up with a full, comprehensive picture of what exactly exactly happened here, but based on a battle damage assessment that was carried out by U.S. Central Command, essentially looking at the images and looking at what was actually damaged, the Defense Intelligence Agency has assessed that the core components of Iran's nuclear program are largely intact, and that Iran's nuclear program has essentially only been set back by months. Now, we presented this information to the White House for comment, and White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, she did acknowledge the existence of this assessment, but she said in a statement that the administration disagrees with it. She said, quote, "This alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their targets, total obliteration." Now, it is worth noting here that there has been dissent, I should say, within the intelligence community, within the defense community, about just how much of an impact these massive bunker buster bombs would actually have on Iran's nuclear facilities. It was far from certain, given that these bombs had never been tested in an actual combat scenario, whether they would actually penetrate those very, very deep underground tunnels that lie underneath these nuclear facilities. And what we are told is that as of now, this Defense Intelligence Agency assessment, it does conclude at this point, again, it is still very early, that those underground facilities, including the centrifuges, including the highly enriched uranium that everyone has been talking so much about, those are largely intact. Now, of course, this does stand at odds with what President Donald Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth have been saying in recent days about the impact of these U.S. military strikes. Of course, President Trump said it was totally obliterated, and Secretary Hegseth did as well. And he actually also provided CNN with a statement. And he said that, quote, "Based on everything we have seen, and I've seen it all, our bombing campaign obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons. Our massive bombs hit exactly the right spot at each target and worked perfectly. The impact of those bombs is buried under a mountain of rubble in Iran. So anyone who says the bombs were not devastating is just trying to undermine the president and the successful mission." Now, our sources did emphasize here that there was severe damage that was done largely to the above-ground structures at these nuclear sites. And so there was damage done, of course, by these massive bombs. But the core components of the nuclear program, we are told, they are largely intact, and it only set the program back by a matter of months. Boris, Brianna.
Natasha Bertrand, please stand.
So Carolyn Leavitt is freaking out. She is furious. She is attacking the leakers instead of acknowledging what is actually the case, which is that Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, and J.D. Vance were lying. They claimed that these strikes were a complete success, that they totally obliterated the sites in Iran, but that's just not true according to the intelligence reports that are coming out of the Pentagon. Of course, they weren't supposed to be coming out of the Pentagon, and it's not just that the intelligence reports go against everything that Donald Trump has to say. That is so interesting here. It's also interesting who Donald Trump doesn't want to see those intelligence reports, and that's members of Congress. Donald Trump has been doing everything he can to keep specifically Democrats in the dark on these illegal strikes, and there's obviously a reason why, and that was all broken down by Yasmin Ansari, the congresswoman who has been calling out Donald Trump relentlessly and so powerfully. She did right here as well.
Americans. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us. Your district does have one of the largest Iranian American populations in the country. So when that briefing does finally take place, what are the key questions you'd like answered?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. There are so many questions I have been looking forward to asking this administration, including, first and foremost, what was the intelligence that showed us the urgency of actually taking military action against Iran? I'm also extremely concerned that the president decided to unilaterally and illegally make this decision without not only getting authorization from Congress, but not briefing Congress. And I think the fact that they canceled this briefing today just goes to show how chaotic this administration situation really is. I don't think there's agreement within senior level officials. We've seen over the last couple of days that they have completely contradicted one another in terms of what the purpose of any of this was, with the president himself tweeting about regime change just 2 days ago, to then saying there's a ceasefire, to Tulsi Gabbard saying the intelligence isn't there, then saying the intelligence is there. So they want to make it easier to lie to the American public, and that is unacceptable.
As we wait for those answers, what do you know about right now the situation inside Iran? For example, are there still Americans who want to get out? And if so, is help available to them?
There is not only very little information about the Americans who are inside of Iran, which I'm sure there are, but also very little help in getting out. We know many flights were canceled over the course of a couple of days. The biggest issue that I'm concerned about when it comes to the Iranian people who vastly and vehemently oppose their regime is we already are hearing reports about how the regime is cracking down even further on the civilian population, using what just happened as a reason to imprison even more people, accusing them of being spies. And I think what is going to happen is we are going to see an even more repressive Islamic Republic regime that cracks down on its people, which is devastating for people who did not ask for any of this.
What have you heard from your constituents? I mean, what are their worries for family members who may be still living in Iran or visiting Iran?
I represent an extremely diverse district, a district that's heavily impacted by ICE and Trump's mass deportation policies. Largely speaking, I can tell you that my constituents were extremely opposed to the U.S. militarily taking action and to the potential of another endless war for the United States. My constituents can't even afford housing or health care or their utility bills. So the idea of tax dollars being spent on this was egregious. When I've talked to Iranian Americans, not only in Arizona or across the country, they were very concerned about the way that Donald Trump conducted himself in all of this. Remember, just last week, he used social media to ask a city of 10 million people in Iran to evacuate. This is a massive metropolitan city where people have nowhere to go. So there are just so many concerns here, from the chaoticness and recklessness of the way this president handles foreign policy to the fact that he's not even carrying out the foreign policy priorities of the American people or carrying out his own promises, which was to not get the United States involved in any new wars.
Well, as you know, President Trump had earlier floated the idea of regime change, though in the last hour, while on Air Force One, he said he is opposed to the idea, and he was quoted as saying, regime change takes chaos, and ideally, we don't want to see so much chaos. Do you have a sense of Iran right now and whether there would be an embrace of the idea of regime change there or among your Iranian American constituents?
Here's the thing. Again, the vast majority of Iranians oppose the regime in Iran. I also think it's important to look at the history of not only Iran, but the Middle East and foreign countries writ large, where intervention and trying to influence regime change from the outside is not.
Donald Trump is trying to hide the truth because he knows he has been lying the entire time, and these leaks out of the Pentagon only confirm it. And it is just such beautiful irony that Donald Trump has been attacking CNN the most, and now they are the ones who obtained this leak out of the Pentagon. Again, it just shows what a failure operationally this entire endeavor by the Trump administration was. The whole idea for this was really, in most ways, just to boost Donald Trump's approval rating. The opposite has happened, and now he has another failure. Just like to add to the list, this is crazy. And I don't know what this means for Pete Hegseth, that Donald Trump's got to get mad at him for another leak. The MAGA Civil War is going to be beautiful. We're going to keep you updated on it. And if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.